Welcome to What's Up at Work, the podcast that's all about real talk with the company leaders shaping Northeast Ohio's top workplaces. We're diving into the stories, strategies, and sometimes hilarious moments that come with creating the thriving teams that drive the region's most successful businesses forward. Whether it's a CEO sharing their leadership philosophy or an HR exec spilling their best people-first strategies, we're here to give you insights you can actually use to build a better workplace. Hit play and let's talk about what's really up at work. Welcome back to What's Up at Work. I'm Sam Clyde Schroeder, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at ERC. And today we're exploring what it takes to go from investing in businesses to owning and leading them. No one's better to speak to this than Matt Dailey. After nearly 15 years in private equity, he made a bold move, purchasing Royal Chemical and stepping into the president and CEO role. The jump from PE to manufacturing was unexpected, but Matt's story proves that leadership and business fundamentals transcend industries. In this episode, we'll break down how he identified the right company, stepped into leadership, and applied a data-driven mindset to a business that historically ran on gut instinct. If you're considering entrepreneurship, navigating leadership transitions, or just curious how top leaders make big moves, this episode's for you. Let's get started. Hi, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you today about your career path, and you've taken some unexpected turns in finance and private equity, and now you're leading a chemical manufacturing company. On paper, I mean, that's kind of a winding journey, but it made perfect sense as you were going through it. Can you kind of walk us through what your career path looked like from start to finish?
Sure. So I started in investment banking here in Cleveland. Did that for 3 years, primarily advising middle market businesses as they went through the sale process. And then based on skills and relationships that I made during that time, moved into private equity. So I went from advising companies on the sale to actually being on the other side of the table and evaluating companies as investments. And then eventually got to the point where I kind of couldn't resist the itch of, I think I can run a business. I've been around enough of them, but I've never had to do it. Some point you have to just give it a shot. So throughout my time in investment banking, especially in investment banking, but also in private equity, I was always intrigued and impressed by the sellers that we worked with and watching them lead and seeing what being a business owner meant in terms of commitment, but also flexibility and freedom. And so kind of had something been building, and it just hit the right point.
At what point did you know, okay, I've been in PE, I think I can do this? At what point did you decide to say, hey, I'm ready, let's go? Was there a moment?
No, I think it had just been something that had been on my mind more and more and more. And you reach a point where you say to yourself, you either do it or don't. Kind of make a decision, and if you want to move on, then let's try it. I had the confidence, the stupidity, the call it what you want, to think that if it didn't work, I'd be able to get it back into investment banking or private equity, or there would be something there. And just reached the point where I wanted to give it a shot.
You've been sitting on the other side of the table, as you put it, in the PE space for 15 years. Jumping into wanting to buy a business, how did you approach that?
Sure. So in terms of the process, I kind of approached it as an investment banking mandate. And that's a very disciplined, sort of thoughtful approach to reaching out to the marketplace. So I held myself accountable to at least 10 outreaches every day. And that could be, emails, phone calls, lunches, dinners, cocktails, breakfasts, and preferably at least half of those being in person. I tracked it. I struggle at times with exact discipline. 8's good enough. In this case, I really had to hold myself to that. And so it was hundreds of meetings over the course of hundreds of meetings and conversations over the course of about 6 months or so, until I was connected with that right opportunity, which ended up being Royal Chemical.
What was that meeting like when you were meeting with, I'm assuming, the owner of Royal Chemical?
Correct. Yep. It actually wasn't just that conversation, right? So it's a series of conversations, right? It's a dating process for both me and for Dan, right? So I'm trying to understand the opportunity, and he's trying to evaluate me. I did have to spend a fair amount of time convincing Dan, who had run the business for a long time, that even though I had never run a business personally, I was close enough to it, working with teams, developing strategies, helping the CEO execute, and that those skills were transferable. Understandably, there was some apprehension. On paper, I don't think I would have hired me, right? Because I think I can do this. Please take a shot. And I was very, very fortunate to find somebody in Dan who was willing to listen, first of all, and second of all, willing to take a chance and also just give me the opportunity.
And that dice roll has worked out for him and for you.
I haven't broken it yet, so we haven't broken it yet.
As you were approaching this, I'm assuming you had some ideas in your head of deal breakers and also the ideal type of qualities that a company would look like if you were going to buy it. What were some of those? Maybe start with the deal breakers.
Yeah, so my approach to coming into this was to really keep an open mind, right? Because the reality of it is there are only so many opportunities in a marketplace that was relatively confined. So one of the deal breakers, or one of the must-haves, but maybe not a deal breaker. If there's really a difference, I'm not sure. But being in Northeast Ohio. At the time, 15 years ago or 10 years ago, our kids were 8 to 12, we're just reaching that point of going to, getting into, grade school, middle school, high school.
Right.
And my wife and I are both born and raised here. Our families are here. It's home. And so I wanted to stay here. So that was probably the only must-have. Other than that, you have to keep a very broad perspective, because it's not as though there's 120 different opportunities to choose from.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many things are moving in Cleveland at one point?
It just depends, but there's a relatively small number of them, especially for the opportunity that I was looking for. I didn't come to the table with the private equity backing of, $50 million to go invest into a company. I had to find that right opportunity where the owner was willing to hire somebody who had never run a business and allow them to buy into the business and or buy the business.
I mean,
so there's not that many of them.
Absolutely, that you found the opportunity.
A needle in a haystack for sure.
Wow. Were there any red flags or things that in your head would have broken it for you if the company had X, Y, or Z quality?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, coming in without the direct operating experience and without having been in a particular field, it really was important for me to have a core management team. It didn't have to be a fully built-out management team, but there needed to be an executive or two or three that knew the ins and outs of the industry, had been in there, who I could trust, who would allow me to come on board, get my feet under me, and we could use as the foundation. That was a key thing for me.
Let's talk about you walking through the door on day one at Royal Chemical and having that team around you, but you not really knowing anyone. You had an agreement with the previous owner that would kind of ensure a smooth transition, or in theory. How did that work?
Right. So the agreement with Dan, who is just a gem of a person, was I was hired in September of 2015 as president of the holding company with a handshake agreement that if after some period of time, to be defined what that was, if I liked the opportunity and if after doing due diligence from the inside, if it was what I thought it was, and he trusted me as a leader to be a good steward of the company for the customers and for our employees and for the stakeholders, then we would sit down and talk about doing a deal.
Wow.
So it really was just that. It was a handshake and a leap of faith.
There was no time frame or anything. You're like, let's see how this goes.
Generally speaking, there was talk of maybe a 12-month period. But to be honest, Sam, it was really up to Dan. I had no leverage.
Oh, yeah.
It's as long as you want it to be.
Wow.
But I think that we're on the same page.
That's wild.
But really, it was an acknowledgement on my part of, if you're really going to do this and you really are looking for what is a very unique situation, there's going to be risk. And you're going to have to be flexible, and you're going to have to be willing to tolerate uncertainty. If you're not willing to do that, this is a conversation I had in my head. If you're not willing to do that, then you're going the wrong direction.
Right. That's leadership, right? You're never 100% sure how things are going to shake out, and it's about being adaptable.
Sure.
Also, his flexibility and kind of it sounds like you guys work really well together. Just, he had an open mind, you had an open mind. It sounds like you were also really respectful of the process.
Again, just recognizing where he is. And we become good friends. We keep in touch. We get together frequently. So it's really worked out on both a personal and a professional front.
Wow. On day one, when you walk through the doors, what was priority number one as president and CEO?
Establishing relationships, really, getting to know everybody, meeting everybody, having conversations. Because in my mind, if people don't know you, and if there isn't a base level of trust, no pretty presentation about strategic direction or priorities is going to gain traction, right? There has to be that level of trust for people to really buy into, or to be willing to buy in. Just because you have that trust doesn't mean that you can get them to buy in, or that they will buy in. But without that trust, I think it's difficult to impossible to get anyone to do anything, that if they don't trust you.
You bring up a good point, because change is hard, especially, for an employee of a company with a new leader stepping in. What was the initial reception from the employees when you walked through the door?
Well, the reception that I'm aware of and the actual reception may be two different things.
Right.
But the reception I'm aware of was a warm reception. It was welcoming. I had the opportunity to meet with several of the team members over the course of the roughly 6-month period before I joined, including our CFO and other very much long-term and respected leaders within the firm. So I think the fact that they were shaking my hand as I walked in the door helps. So actually, I went on a company-wide tour. We have 5 facilities, and made that a point just to talk about, hey, this is what got me excited about joining Royal Chemical. First thing on that list was the team and the employees. This is the direction. This is kind of where I see it going. And oh, by the way, if you're thinking that I'm from private equity and that's my playbook, rest assured that this is the last job that I plan on having. We have 3 kids. There could be a chance for them, if they so chose, to come into the business. So this is a long-term thing from my perspective.
That was probably a sigh of relief for everyone.
Depending on what you thought of me.
Okay, so if we fast forward 10 years from that initial, roadshow that you went on, kind of meet and greet, fast forward 10 years, you've established incredible buy-in within the organization. How did you go about doing that? What steps did you take?
Sure. So I think there's one sort of business practice or one sort of personal practice, and then one actual process that we've done. The sort of personal approach, I guess, is I tried to be very approachable. I am very present. So as an example, my office is down in Macedonia. I'm on the plant floor every day, at least once a day, sometimes twice a day.
That's cool.
Walking around, and not just walking around and being visible, but literally stopping and talking to Angel or to Sheila or to Ty or others on the floor. What's going on? How's it going? What's giving you trouble today? And really being, and a third thing is, I think, just be genuine, right? People are going to have questions. People are going to ask, what's going on with this, right? Typically around the end of the year, it's, are we going to do bonuses this year? And you can do the soft shoe and the corporate, well, we're evaluating that. Or if the answer is yes, but to be honest, it's going to be less than last year. Just be honest, right? Because again, it gets back to trust. If I have a conversation with any employee and I say something, I have to assume that is going to every employee, because things travel.
They do.
As well they should.
Yeah.
And if what we ultimately do is not in line with what I said we were going to do, that hurts the trust, which ultimately makes it harder to get buy-in, which ultimately makes it impossible to execute a strategy.
Right. And speaking of employees talking or giving their feedback, I think talk about how the employee engagement survey that you did at the beginning of your time there informed what the results of that were and how it informed your decision-making as a leader moving forward.
Sure. So it actually was several years after I joined. So
okay, several years. Got it.
So it was actually post-COVID. And it was really because of what we experienced during COVID, using this as a reset, right? For a 2.5-year period there, at least in our industry, there was so much upheaval as it relates to, to hiring, to retention, to supply chain, to you name it, lead times, pricing, everything, that we felt like we needed to hit the reset button. And so with the help of ERC, we did a company-wide survey. So we have 5 facilities across the country, everywhere from New Jersey all the way to California, and did a survey. And then the survey was the easy part, frankly, because ERC made it so easy. But really it was getting that survey, distilling what the findings were by location, because each location
That's
had
interesting.
Different
culture.
Some of the themes were the same. Some of the themes, a particular location might have had a theme that was unique to that location.
Interesting.
So with the help of our director of HR, We distilled it all down, and then I began what was about 25 to 30 small group meetings. Now, heading into those meetings, my head of HR pulled me aside and said, Matt, I just want to set expectations that your job in these meetings is to listen, right? We're not here to argue. We're not here to counterpoint. It's listening. We'll have time to, and she said, can be difficult for you. To be honest, it wasn't. It was interesting because I really wanted to hear. So we had 25 or 30 meetings over the course of probably a month or so. It was fantastic. It might sound like 25 to 30 meetings in 5 different facilities in a month-long period. That sounds like hell on earth. It was the 100% opposite. It was so invigorating for me to get out there, to really have conversations that mattered to people, right? It's one thing to talk about what you want to talk about, but when somebody's telling you, here's what I'd like you to talk about, it just feels more valuable both ways.
That would terrify me 30 times walking into a meeting of employees saying, tell me what you think of me. Yep. Tell me what you're thinking.
It was culture. It was facility. It was benefits. It was pay. It was. I mean, some of the conversations some of them were amazing in terms of things that were going on or things that had gone on that nobody on our senior leadership team knew about. Right?
Was there anything really surprising that you discovered?
No, it wasn't any. There wasn't any. But it wasn't so much what we discovered. I mean, there was certainly a long list of improvements, opportunities that we made. A lot of them would be around the usual, facility, compensation, but there were a number of observations and suggestions that we kind of took a step back and went, that's absolutely right. Which then begs the question of a follow-up meeting, which that was a wonderful comment. Thank you for that. By the way, if you have more of those, come talk to us, right? So it's trying to get that, we've got the dialogue started, let's keep it going.
This is an interesting quality for a leader to have. That's the seeking feedback. And I think it's, one of the things that can make a leader really strong and help improve the culture of the organization. There's a lot of leadership changes going on right now out in the world, generations moving in, moving out. For those who are stepping into leadership roles, as someone especially like you who seeked out that feedback, what advice would you give these new leaders coming in? If you had to tell them one thing, like, do this.
For me, it was humility, right? You don't, especially for me, there was a lot that I didn't know. There was a lot of really cool, advanced things that I had been exposed to and done in my career. I was fortunate enough to do and see a lot, but you have to be willing to admit the fact that what you did before, at least in my case, doesn't really matter. It's what you're going to learn from everybody here and collectively create and build. That's the important part.
That's so interesting. And on the flip side, what is one mistake you feel like could really erode relationships with employees?
I think it's the exact opposite of humility, right? I mean, we've all seen those people who come into the room, they are the smartest, they know everybody, right? It's people don't want to hang out with those sort of people, let alone aren't going to put in the extra effort to really go above and beyond for people like that.
Oh, gosh, that's so interesting. Okay, so your background being in something completely different than manufacturing, and you're coming in with the humility that you spoke of, some of the PE skills definitely translated, right? Can you talk about how they influence the way that you approach running the business?
Sure. So I was really fortunate because I had 15 years of seeing some really advanced, highly functioning management teams and companies and systems. And it was a blessing, right? So, visiting and meeting with entrepreneurs and teams across the country over a 15-year career, you begin to pick out little nuggets, right? In different industries as well. So I have a strong background in manufacturing all through private equity, a strong background in technology and software, a strong background in technology-enabled businesses. So you kind of build up these, a mental file of, I've seen this work well to address this, right? So as we came across issues, and frankly, it kind of spoiled me, which is kind of how we went down the path of technology and automation, was because I had expectations of information being available to the, eighth decimal when we snap our fingers. What do you mean that's not possible? It's totally possible. I've seen systems that do that, but we don't have those, right? So I think it's, in terms of the skills that are transferable, a lot of them were just the experiences. The financial analysis and the number crunching, that's not necessarily specific to private equity, right? That comes with the finance and accounting background. But really, I think it was the experience and having a chance to see what's out there, what's possible, right? Because it's tough to say what the solution is if you don't have experience with what the solution could be.
Right. Okay, based on your background in finance and PE, obviously data matters to you. How do you use that piece of your experience to inform your decision making on a daily basis?
So just to back up for a second, if I could, when I joined, we had a very good ERP system. Functioned, it met exactly the business needs. However, we didn't have anybody on our team that had the experience to extract data and present it in a way that was usable in a user-friendly format. So something which I would say as simple as, hey, can I see sales by customer, by product from last month? My CFO, God bless him, would say, sure, and you'd hear a sigh, and 5 days later it would show up.
Right.
I finally said, Ed, I'm not trying to be a jerk. Let's talk about what do we have to do. Well, finally we ended up bringing on a resource to help us. So the data that we have now informs us as to inventory detail by customer. So I can see, for a particular customer, raws, finished goods, packaging, all of that, which then we can factor into discussions with our customers as to what the appropriate stocking level is. You factor then into, I have visibility into real-time invoicing. So throughout the day, I can kind of see how it's going. I have visibility. We all have visibility. That's the beautiful thing about the technology is everybody in the company has the visibility of it. What orders came in yesterday? So what's our 30-day trailing order volume? There's so much that the information gives us.
Yeah, that real-time transparency. There's nothing beats
it. That's the word. It's because the data was always there. It's not like we created the data. We created the visibility and the transparency.
Okay, so with the employee situation that we discussed, it being difficult sometimes to kind of adjust to new leadership, paired with this data-driven mindset that you came in with that it sounds like was kind of new to the organization at the time. What was some of the employee reaction to kind of your focus on data, and how did you as a group kind of shift and get that implemented? Right.
So we've been talking about data, but really it was putting a technology platform on top of our ERP. That one of the benefits was to give us the visibility that we just talked about. The second benefit is it gave us the ability to automate processes and to move what had been paper-based tasks into a digital format. So I'm talking things like our scheduling function. Typically was literally done on a whiteboard in somebody's office, and they would have it up on the board, and if a certain job didn't run that day, they would erase it and then rewrite the entire board. They were the only one that knew what the schedule was unless you left the manufacturing floor and went into their office and looked. That's gone to completely digital. So our employees now, our production employees have iPads on the floor. They can see what their production schedule is, and they can click on that upcoming job. Brings up an electronic ticket, basically a recipe, and electronic mix instructions, electronic sign-off. All of these things that were done paper have now moved to electronic. So the systems. So your question was, how did people react? I think having visibility into the data wasn't very threatening to anybody. Because frankly, only a handful of us really cared about, really we're looking to make decisions based on it. The change in the process, moving from paper-based to electronic, hugely disruptive. That's how they had done it for their entire career. And now you're telling me I got to stop writing on my board and I got to use an iPad. I got to use a desktop application. Well, the reality of it is, if I have it on my board, people have to come in my office throughout the day.
Right.
That's where the information is. I hold the information. It is true, and I'm sure it helps with some very, very pleasant conversations. It doesn't help with efficiency. It doesn't help with accuracy. It doesn't help with redundancy. All these sorts of things. And so it was very disruptive.
What were some of the immediate kind of tangible aspects or tangible outcomes of moving into some of this transparent operation, if you will? a lot of times I've found that employees get on board when they see that you get a win out of the change. What were some of those tangible wins that you saw?
Sure. So you're exactly right. There was resistance until you can show how the new system or the revised system, the digital system, is actually a benefit. So simple example, but it's illustrative. Back to the scheduling function, you've got Jim who writes everything up on the board, and then when he has to move a job, he has to erase the entire board and then write what the new board is. Important, but not value added. Digital format, he can X out that job, drop in this job, boom, it's updated, right? So you've gone from spending 20 minutes writing on your board to 20 seconds dropping that in.
Yeah,
increased accuracy. So our electronic production tickets, but when they were paper-based, they would be left on the production floor, and second shift would come in, and there'd be a production ticket there. Was it made? I don't know. Let's make it again. Well, they just made a batch that had already been made on first shift. Not to their credit, because they're going above and beyond. But with electronic batch tickets, you don't have that, because once it's opened, it's got to be closed.
Right. Okay, so cost of time, obviously, and then also there was probably a lot of savings in just that reproduction of product. Yeah.
The reproduction of product, as stupid as it sounds, paper.
Yeah.
I mean, these are 20-page things that you had hundreds of them a day. I mean,
right.
it sounds silly,
if you blow through it.
But it really is the personnel efficiency and the ability to take someone's 8-hour days and the tasks they would accomplish in those 8 hours, make those existing tasks be 4 hours, and allow them to focus on things outside of what they had typically done in those 4. It allows the individual to grow, right? It allows them to contribute more to the organization. And eventually those people, because of their skill set that we've collectively allowed to expand by giving them more time, they're able to advance throughout the organization.
Right.
Right. So it's a hugely positive thing.
Everybody wins.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I think so too. In manufacturing, this manual setup, doing things the long way, if you will, it's not unique to Royal Chemical. There are a lot of manufacturing companies who are still in that manual data entry, taking snapshots versus real-time visibility. And it's kind of an intimidating thing to face switching over or wanting to take that step into that digital realm, the automated realm. What advice would you give someone who is approaching that cliff? Like, here is the first thing that worked for me, for example.
Yeah, so for us, I would point to the number one factor that allowed us to be successful was having the right individual leading the effort. So, as I mentioned, we had a great ERP system, but did not have the system or the capability to give us visibility, real-time visibility into it. Identifying and recruiting someone who could actually show our management team, articulate what could be possible. Again, I go back to, at the time, I didn't anticipate moving from the way we were scheduling to digital scheduling or automatic purchase order entry or automatic product dispatch. That wasn't on my radar because I hadn't really thought through it. This person came in and said, "Oh, yeah, we can do this." And again, they had that perspective.
Right.
So once you begin to, you get a core group of people that are excited about it, then you go out and evangelize amongst the organization.
Right. It trickles out. That's really interesting. Along these same lines, for an owner of a manufacturing company who is, again, trying to move into this automation and data-driven world, what are a couple of the key data points that you would say, hey, watch this and this. This is how you're going to find success. This is where your first wins will lie.
I would, if you don't mind, I would change it the other way, because I would say if I was having coffee with a fellow business owner who was talking about how they're going to embark on this journey, the number one thing I would say is it's going to be harder and take longer than you ever think it would.
Interesting.
To me, it was a no-brainer, and it was made an absolute 100%. There was no debate. This is how we had to go, and these are all the benefits. And I couldn't understand for the life of me, why are we struggling to get people to use this system? I mean, it's just they preferred to use the paper-based system, even though all of the benefits that we just articulated, or I just articulated. So it's less of, hey, start here, because I think every journey is different, right? Every culture is different. Every business metrics are different. So I can't say this is what could go wrong in terms of this metric or this system. I would say that it was incredibly humbling and frustrating. Why I was personally, just kind of questioning, why can't you get people to see the benefit that you see so clearly? Mm-hmm. It took a while.
What was there a magic moment? Was there a turning point? Did something specific happen that kind of got people across the threshold?
It was just a slow build.
Yeah.
It was as you had, 3 people excited about it, and then those 3 people became 5 people, and then those 5 people became 8 people, and it kind of builds from there.
Yeah.
And candidly, there was always, at the end of the process, we still had people that, although 98% of the people had gotten on board, they just weren't going to. They weren't going to get there, and they were articulating that they weren't going to get there.
Right.
And so we had to make a decision on that, and repurpose them in a different role that didn't require technology, or maybe it was time for them to transition out, on their schedule, our schedule. So it's not going to be perfect.
Right.
But
right.
It's just that those small wins is how you build a lot of momentum.
Yeah, and you end up with a snowball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, Matt, we're going to play a game now.
I love games.
Me too. This is called HR Hot Seat. We play it every episode. And it's a bunch of quick rapid fire questions, and you give your best answer in 3 sentences or less.
Got it.
You ready?
Yep.
All right. What's the biggest curveball you've had to deal with since stepping into manufacturing?
Global pandemic.
I can't even.
I didn't anticipate that one.
You didn't see that coming?
No, I didn't. Didn't have a playbook on the shelf for that one.
Not many did. Not many did. Is there anything you must have to start your day?
Caffeine.
Caffeine. Any particular type of
Usually
caffeine?
Coffee. Occasionally I'll mix it up with an iced tea. Maybe even a
Wild.
tea, but usually coffee.
I like it. Tried and true. What's one surprising skill you picked up early in your career that still serves you today?
This might be more than 3 sentences. So when I was in college, I was a cold caller for an investment advisor in Dayton.
Love it.
And I had to make, 300 calls a night. From 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, right during dinner time, right?
That's fast. That's rapid production.
Because most people didn't answer.
Right.
But, when you got the people on the phone, you had to go through your pitch real quick. And within 2 seconds, you had to really make a judgment of, does this person want to hear the long intro or the short intro? You could usually tell by the tone when they picked up the phone. So anyways, just to bring that, that ability to quickly, hopefully correctly assess your style and how I can, adapt my style to be more effective with your style. It's very helpful as it relates to, meeting with customers, meeting with suppliers, there's any sort of interactions, right?
Yeah, reading the room.
If you don't like the long answer and all I do is give you the long answer, it's not going to go as well as if I can sense that and really give you the short answer.
100%. I love it. I mean, that's so accurate, and I live that every day in my job as well. What is the best piece of feedback you've ever received from an employee?
I trust you. It was so cool. Actually, it's just when you're having a conversation with somebody and you don't have all the specifics worked out, and an employee stands up and says, I trust you, we'll figure it out, you guys will treat me right.
That's awesome. What's one work habit you refuse to give up, even if people think it's odd?
I stretch in my office.
Do you?
And my office is all glass. So there's no hiding, right? So a couple times a day, I'll stretch my hamstrings and my quads and lay on my back, and so be it.
All right, if you could instantly master one skill you don't already have, what would it be?
I would love to be a scratch golfer. I'm not there. I'm going to continue trying. I got a long way to go.
All right. What's one thing about running a business that nobody warned you about?
The incredible value that you feel on certain days and the incredible lows that you feel on others. Mm-hmm. It's, I guess, in retrospect, should have been expected, but there's plenty of days where I'll leave and it's been fantastic. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of days where you're leaving saying, I don't understand why we can't do X, right? And it weighs on you, right? But it's ultimately when you accomplish X, whatever that is, it goes back to one of those, to the flip side, which is incredible value. So
how do you get yourself through when, you're having a low? How do you get yourself on through to the next
This
high?
Is where I'm really appreciative for having 15 or 18 years in a transactional business. Yeah. Transactions fall apart all the time, right? And so there's many, many, many examples. And anybody who's in investment banking or in private equity would tell you the same thing. So I learned early on in my career, it's never as good as you think it is, and it's never as bad as you think it is, right? So we'd be maybe doing due diligence on an investment opportunity that everybody really likes, and then all of a sudden, a certain deal term falls apart, and the deal's off, and you're kind of dejected because you just invested 45 days of your calendar in it, and then 2 days later, all of a sudden, we solved that issue, so now we're back on, and so you go from these highs and lows, and so early on, I had to learn to manage that. Really, the key is just to maintain in the middle, right? When you feel like going really high, just remind yourself that you're going to get knocked down at some point. Bring yourself down, and vice versa. When I'm really low, or when I should be feeling really low, pull yourself back up. It's going to break at some point.
Yeah, that's a great example of how your background plays into how you run the company. That's very interesting. Matt, this has been a fantastic conversation. Before we wrap up, I have one final question. When you look back at your time at Royal Chemical years from now, what's the one thing you hope people remember most about your leadership?
He cared. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's great to say sales did this and, profitability did this, and believe me, those have to happen. But to say that it was done in a way where employees felt good about where they worked and who they worked with, that's what my hope is.
Just a huge thanks to Matt Dailey for sharing his story and leadership insights. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and follow along for more conversations with leaders who are shaping the future of work. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep leading, keep learning, and stay curious about what's up at work. We hope you enjoyed this episode of What's Up at Work. Now it's time to get out there and start building better workplaces. If you need help with where to start, ERC has your back. Head to yourerc.com for exclusive HR tools, insights, and resources to help you attract and retain top talent. And keep tuning into What's Up at Work for more strategies and secrets to help leaders like you create thriving workplaces. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.